What did I just watch? Well, that was a movie. Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm giving my first thoughts on Kajillionaire, which was written and directed by Miranda July and starring Evan Rachel Woods. So in case you don't know the plot of this film, it follows a family of petty criminals as they commit fraud, theft, and everything they can to go from being dirt poor broke to becoming Kajillionaires. Or at least so they'd hope. When they add a new member to their group, things start getting complicated. At least that's what the plot is about on the surface. But there's a lot more that happens that I'm not going to tell you about until spoilers, because this movie goes off the rails a little bit. So what do I think of the movie Kajillionaire? I don't entirely know yet. It was very weird, it was very quirky, it was very unique, it was very dark, and it was very funny. When the movie first started, it actually reminded me a lot of Jared Hess, the director of Napoleon Dynamite and Nacho Libre and other movies like that. It was very weird and quirky in a very similar style to his. But then as the movie went on, it started to remind me more of Spike Jonze and other weirder directors, and even at times started to get dark like a Fincher film. I don't want to give anything away, but this movie does go places that you won't expect it to go. It doesn't have a very typical plot to it. And I think a large group of people are going to hate this movie. But I think another large group of people is going to love it because it is so unique and bizarre. The writing and acting of this movie is so good because it's so bizarre and so weird and so strange, and if you took just 5 seconds to start asking questions, you could probably unravel the whole plot string by string, but you never want to because you're so enraptured by this odd little world. No, the plot doesn't entirely make sense. Like I said, if you just stopped to ask some questions, you would have a lot more questions than you would have answers because it doesn't honestly fit together completely. But you don't ever really get to that point. You may ask yourself several times, what the hell am I watching? I know I did while watching it, but the answer was always, I don't know, something entertaining. And I think different people will have different reactions to seeing this movie. Some people will find it depressing. Some people will find it funny. And maybe it's equal parts both. It definitely was a lot of both. It's kind of funny because I would categorize this movie as a dark comedy. It's not all like that. I don't think the entire movie can be categorized that way, but if you take the movie as a whole, it's most relatable to a dark comedy. And for the most part, I hate dark comedies because they're so predictable. It's just endless anti-jokes about dead babies, but that's not what this movie was at all. This movie had dark situations that were being joked about, but they were new and interesting and unique jokes that weren't just relying on all the tropes that I'm used to seeing in dark comedy. Because this movie is quirky and odd and strange, and it's hard to say whether or not it's actually good, but it's so well written that even though I don't even know why I like it, I do. It's just such a bizarre story, such a bizarre world that is created here, but it's so wonderfully written and so believably acted that I fully believe everything that I'm seeing, and I just enter into this world without asking any questions. I just believe what I'm being shown, and that's just good filmmaking. That might not be your reaction to this movie. You may watch it and have a million questions. I know I could have if I stopped to ask them, but I didn't. I just dove headfirst into this story and enjoyed every second of it. Well, maybe not every second of it. I will say that the last quarter of this movie, and maybe even a little bit more, got bogged down with it feeling like it needed to say something. And I don't think that it actually needed to, but I think that the writer-director Miranda July felt that she had to say something with it. Everything in this movie was oddity for the sake of oddity and just a bizarre story, and to kind of force a meaning and a message into it at the end didn't really work for me, especially when you're sacrificing comedy for this story. That happens in a lot of comedies where the ending of the movie gets really bogged down because you have to wrap everything up, you have to complete the story, you have to give a message maybe. All of that can take away from the comedy because you don't have time for the comedy, or at least it's harder to put comedy into that situation when you're trying to talk about something else. And that's how this movie felt to me. It wasn't entirely bad, but it definitely didn't feel as good as the beginning of it. It almost felt like the movie kind of overwore its welcome. It kind of stayed past its expiration date. I enjoyed it a lot to a certain extent, and then after a point, I started finding myself checking the runtime and seeing how much was left. You're either gonna love it or hate it, and I'm on the side that I love it. And it really is just because it is so bizarre and unique. There's a lot of things you can complain about in indie films, but being unique and bizarre is generally not one of them. But because of all that, it makes it hard for me to know if I should recommend this to you or not, because it is very quirky, it is very indie feeling, it is very odd, it's dark, it's funny, and it's strange, and that's all I can say. So if you like movies like that, you'll enjoy it, and if you don't, I don't blame you. Not everybody does. This isn't a crowd pleaser movie. This is for a very specific audience, and if you are part of that very specific audience, I think you will love it, because I know I did. But I don't think that everybody should just go watch it because I said so. It's not for everybody. I don't honestly even know what the demographic for this movie is. People who like weird shit. That pretty much sums it up. But anyway, that's my spoiler-free review. I'm going to get into spoilers now, so if you don't want anything spoiled, if you haven't seen it yet, you should click away now, but please remember to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye. So, the plot of this movie, in case you don't know, you haven't seen it yet, but you want it spoiled anyway because you don't listen to me when I tell you to click away. The plot of this movie is they end up adding another girl to the group, a fourth member to their group of crime and fraud and all of that, and she ends up bringing an outside perspective onto their strange little world, because this family is very strange. They have weird cultish type behaviors and weird beliefs that they hold on to as if they're fact, and this girl, this main character played by Evan Rachel Wood, is brainwashed and has been brainwashed her whole life by her parents to believe everything that they say. So this new girl coming in gives her a fresh new perspective on life as a whole and how her parents are treating her kind of oddly and incorrectly. So this movie becomes more about perspective on life and what it's like to try to leave a toxic situation and how hard it is and all the problems and struggles that come with that. So, like I said, it's a lot different than what you expect when you first start the movie. You think it's going to be a comedy about theft and fraud and all of that fun stuff, and then it becomes a weird commentary on life. And it's kind of uncomfortable, but there's some interesting messages in there that I enjoy. But like I said, it does take away from the comedy when it gets a little heavy-handed with the commentary. So you kind of give and take a little bit with it. And I feel differently about a couple of different things in the commentary that it presents, because I really agree with some of it, and some of it I'm a bit iffy on. But one of the really cool things that it says is it talks about how some people are just made uncomfortable by comfort. They would rather be uncomfortable. They would rather be struggling. They would rather be trying to survive, and the second that they're allowed to have some sort of normalcy, it makes them uncomfortable because they're so used to the struggling that they have been brought up in, and so leaving that is actually hard. And so people actually make their lives harder on purpose, subconsciously, because they want to struggle, because that's what they're used to. And that is a hard thing to accept, but that is a very interesting thing to dive into a little bit here. And so an interesting thing that happens here is that Gina Rodriguez, who plays the new girl in the group, takes Evan Rachel Wood's character under her wing and kind of tries to teach her what normal life is supposed to look like. Like, her parents never gave her a birthday present, or they never called her cute little nicknames like sweetheart or honey or anything like that. So this girl is trying to help this other girl to understand all of this and understand what it's like to be loved and to be a human that has a personality and can express themselves and deal with emotions and all of that, because this girl has been put in the hardest of shells her whole life and has never had any ability to express herself or go outside of her little world that's been created for her or anything like that. She doesn't know anything but this little world. So as she's learning more, her whole world is crumbling apart because she's found out that the world is false. So Gina Rodriguez's character is trying to help her through this process of unlearning and relearning. And this is a very cute and moving story, and I love it for the most part. But I have one small teeny tiny complaint. Their relationship turns sexual. And even from before this starts happening, you can tell there are hints of it because of a weird little clip where Woods' character accidentally knocks off a nail off of Gina Rodriguez's character and then begins peeling them off one by one. And this is supposed to represent her unknowing of even the most of basic things, such as fake nails. She's never even been exposed to that. But even in that moment, there is a slight hint at sexual tension between these characters, and that carries on until eventually blossoming into a sexual romance in this movie. And, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with them becoming a couple at some point in this movie, but it kind of cheapens the overall message of her trying to help her because it feels like there's ulterior motives there. If she was just trying to teach her what it's like to be a normal human being and to live a normal human life, if it was more platonic, that would feel more genuine because she's not actually gaining anything from it. But if she's sexually attracted to this girl, then she's gaining a sexual partner out of it. So it doesn't feel like she's doing it out of the goodness of her heart. It feels like she's doing it because she's benefiting from it. Now, that might not be true. I'm just saying it feels a little bit cheaper because of that, and I kind of wish that they had just stayed away from any romantic interest at all. So that is my number one complaint about this movie. And so, that's it. I was trying to think if I had any more complaints about the movie, and I don't really. I don't know. There are some other weird things in this movie that I didn't love, but it's not because it was bad. It was because I just probably would have made a different decision, but who am I to judge based on just that? It was still good. It was still its own unique story. I think the stuff with the parents at the end, where they tried to redeem themselves but only kind of half redeemed themselves, is poetic in a way, because oftentimes when we leave toxic situations and we leave toxic people behind, they want to prove to us that they have changed, and they want to prove to us that they are worth taking back, or you coming back into that toxic situation with them. And so it's showing that these people didn't or couldn't really change entirely. They changed a little bit at first, it seemed, and then nope, psych, they didn't actually change at all. That was fair, but it is rather depressing. So, once again, this movie isn't for everybody. If you don't like depressing endings, if you don't like depressing movies, this movie's not for you, because this movie is kind of just depressing in a lot of ways. But it does offer a small glimpse of hope, because in the end, she was able to put behind that toxic life and enter into a new, hopefully much healthier life. And that is something worth celebrating, and that's something worth writing a story about. But in the end, it does kind of feel like we watched a little bit of two different movies, because where the movie starts and where the movie ends are such drastically different areas that I'm glad the story moved, I'm glad the story progressed, but if you already know where it ends, watching the beginning again, if you want to watch the movie again later, almost would feel odd and just unnecessary, because it really does travel such a far distance in such a short time that your head could spin a little bit. But I don't know, these are all just nitpicks. Like I said, I enjoyed this movie. I didn't know what to expect from this movie, and I got exactly what I didn't know I was expecting, which was oddity. And still not knowing what to expect, even though I've already seen it. So, yeah, what did you guys think? I need to think about this one for a while. So, let me know in the comments below what you guys thought, and of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you're new here. Thanks, guys.